Feel free to have a seat. Okay, standing, everyone? Okay. Well, it seems like it was just a few months ago that we were here together for a similar sad occasion. And now we come here to remember Lois and to think of her love and caring in this family. As is our tradition, we look into the book of Psalms for comfort. There it is written, Esayinai el heharim, me'ayin yavo Ezri. Ezri me'im Adonai oseh shamayim va'aretz. I lift up my eyes to the mountains. What is the source of my help? My help comes from the eternal, maker of heaven and earth. God will not let your foot give way. Your protector does not slumber. Behold, the protector of Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. God is your guardian. God is your protection at your right hand. The sun will not strike you by day, nor the moon by night. Adonai yishmor tzetecha uvoecha me'ata ve'ad olam. May the Eternal guard your soul in your going and your coming, now and forevermore. And we remember with the psalmist, Mizmor LeDavid, Adonai roi lo echsar, b'no deshe yarbitzeni, almei menuchot yinachaleni, nafshi yeshovev. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. You make me lie down in green pastures, you lead me beside still waters, you restore my soul. You lead me in right paths for the sake of your name. Even when I walk in the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil, for you are with me. With rod and staff you comfort me. You set a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You have anointed my head with oil. My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Eternal forever. For Lois, who was indeed a woman of valor, and so much more, we read from the book of Proverbs. A woman of valor who can find. Her price is higher than rubies. The heart of her husband trusts in her, and so he lacks nothing. She does him good and never harm all the days of her life. She stretches out her hand to the poor. She reaches forth her hand to the needy. She is clothed in strength and dignity, and she laughs at the time to come. She opens her mouth with wisdom, and the law of kindness is on her tongue. She looks well to the ways of her household, and eats not the bread of idleness. Her children rise up and call her blessed. Her husband too, and he praises her. Many daughters have done valiantly, but you excel them all. Grace is deceptive, and beauty short-lived, but a woman that fears God shall be praised. Give her of the fruit of her hands, and let her works praise her in the gates. Death has summoned our beloved Lois Press. Our souls cry out unto you, O God. What are we? Are we the creatures of dust whose destiny is but to return to the dust from which we came? The ancient sage has taught us the spirit of the human being is the lamp of the Eternal. Not even the darkness of death can extinguish the light which the Eternal has kindled in the sanctuary of the human soul. Therefore, O God, we thank you in this solemn hour for that which was deathless in the life of our cherished Lois, and which is now revealed to us in all of its beauty. For her love that united us in life and which death cannot sever. For her companionship which we shared along life's path and which still continues through the tenderness of memory. For the gifts of her heart and of her mind, which brought us joy and happiness and now have become a precious heritage of the Spirit. For all these and more, we give you our praise. Grant unto us, O God, the strength of all the generations of our people, who in the face of bereavement proclaimed, Adonai Natan, Adonai Lakach, Yehi Shem Adonai Mevorach. God has given, God has taken away. Still, blessed be the name of God. It's so fitting that we're gathering here together as we begin the week when the Torah portion, Chaye Sarah, which means the life of Sarah, is being read. It addresses personalities and personal growth, be it through love, through death, or through personal introspection. The irony is that the name of the portion is Chaye Sarah, which means the life of Sarah. But this portion begins with Sarah's death and ends with the death of Abraham. Upon learning of Sarah's death, Abraham, the Bible tells us, procures a burial site for her, what will become known as the Cave of Machpelah, where our matriarchs and patriarchs of the Torah will be buried. Gathered here at this site, this family has come to understand what Abraham must have gone through to decide where to bury his beloved Sarah, and how a simple piece of ground becomes sacred to a family. Much of the rest of the portion describes the steps leading toward the marriage of Isaac and Rebekah. Sarah's greatest accomplishment was her son's growth, both physically and mentally, into a unique, holy, mature person who is able and worthy to be called our Father. And so too, as we come here to mourn the matriarch of this family, we recognize that it is you, her children, her grandchildren, her great-grandchildren, who are the accomplishment of her life, as you live your lives by the values that she held up for you through her very being. She served nutrition on the plate before you to help you grow, even as she served as an inspiration, nurturing the person that you would grow into. The other thing about this Torah portion is the way that the authors tell us about Sarah's age at the time of her death. Rather than simply reveal it as 127 years, they instead break it into what could be considered phases of her life. The Torah reads, Sarah's life was 100 years, and 20 years, and 7 years. This is to teach us that life is indeed a journey, lived stage by stage to life everlasting. And so as we gather here at this sacred burial site that will inform the generations of this family tree, we dedicate this time of reflection to Lois's greatest accomplishment, her family, and we reflect upon the stages of her life as they reveal the journey that she has made both physically and spiritually to this moment in time. Lois was born in 1926. That would make her 94 years had she lived to November 18th, her birthday. She was the youngest of 3 children of Harold and Augusta or Gussie Laserson. Her oldest sister was Honey, and then came Myra. Close as children, Lois continued to look after Myra, who lived in a group home and was fond of her nephews as well. As one of the few Jewish families in Steubenville, with her father being the butcher of the kosher meat market there, Lois grew up helping to deliver the meat to families in town. As was the case for our matriarch Sarah, for Lois, being Jewish was about knowing that God was with her everywhere, and holidays were the occasions to affirm the centrality of the traditions with her family and with good food. Certainly God was with Lois when she would meet the love of her life, Norman Press. As was the case in this week's Torah portion, where our future matriarch Rebekah met our future patriarch Isaac on a blind date, so too did best friends of Lois and Norman fix them up in what might have seemed like a mismatch, Norman was more the choir boy type, and Lois was more accustomed to dating the football star kind of guy. But clearly Lois's beauty and vivaciousness were appealing to Norman, and it was Norman's gentle kindness that won her over. He proposed on April Fool's Day, which caught Lois off guard, but even at 19 years of age, she was no fool. She knew this was the kind of real love and commitment that makes for fairy tale stories, and that theirs would last 73 years. The key to their relationship seemed to be to put each other first. Lois continued to spoil him, attending to his every need. Energized by her dedication, she laid out his clothes every day and even buttered his toast and rubbed his head. Ever the social director, Lois kept them engaged with the monthly couples club that went back to their dating days and trips to the cottage for fun. They enjoyed bowling together and delighted in annual cruises that kept all of the friends connected, especially during those 30 years that they spent in West Palm in Florida. When Norman won a trip to Italy for his sales at the furniture store, they traveled abroad. Not the showy type, though. She always looked meticulously put together and appreciated good quality. But Lois was content to live a modest life and to be home with her family. The next chapter of her life included Lois and Norman creating their own family. First came Andy, then almost like his twin 11 months later, Marcy. And then there's that 7-year gap until Greg was born. Lois doted on you even as she was strict for the first of you two. For Andy, Lois was the one who made sure you got to play sports, and because your dad was at work, she wound up being the only woman attending the lecture on the facts of life at your school, and then having to explain them to you. But she did a great job helping you become a caring man who would be devoted to Charlene. And Lois was so grateful, Charlene, for your kindness toward her and toward Norman. Early morning coffee runs by Andy. These were the times that Lois looked forward to, and then you would call Marcy to give her the report. For Marcy, Lois was as much a girlfriend as she was a mother. While you weathered the fact that she'd make you model your clothes for her before going to school, her way of making sure you were dressed appropriately, perhaps, you looked forward to the mother-daughter shopping trips that lasted a whole lifetime. She was happy to know that Bill was in your life, and she could stop worrying now. She would end every conversation with both of you telling you, "I love you." Greg, while his mother was strict with the older two of you, Lois let Greg get away with a lot of nonsense, even writing notes so that he could skip school to play pool, apparently. When Marcy recounted Greg's antics to your mom, Lois's response was, "I'm glad I didn't know it at the time." Trips to Florida with Janice strengthened their connection, and even when they lived abroad, they made sure to keep Lois close through phone calls and tales of what they saw. Lois was, however, a homebody. For each of you, in your mind's eye, your mom is tending to all the household chores. She wouldn't even let you lift a finger around the house, saying it was easier for her to do it herself, including making your beds. And when it came to her love of ironing, you'd say she could iron through a storm. Everything had its place, and her place was often the front step waiting for you kids to come home from school for lunch. She wasn't the greatest cook, perhaps, but she never lacked for a meal, and she was the main course in what she taught you about being a good person. As you all got older, she took a job at the event shop, selling fashionable clothes because she looked the part herself. She'd worked earlier as a secretary for the Army, but her favorite job of all time was babysitting for her grandchildren, and she did a lot of that in Florida. What a wonderful chapter in her life all of her grandchildren became. She adored her 5 grandchildren, and each of you reciprocated in similar fashion. As to fashion, for Hallie, Darcy, and Kim, one of your favorite activities was dressing up in her clothes to give Lois a fashion show. For Stephen and Mitchell, she let you have toys that perhaps your parents were less keen on. For all of you, hanging out at the pool together, where she would bring you delicious lunches and lots of snacks. Her fabulous breakfasts of toast with pineapple jelly were some of your special memories. And of course, card games, with little hands having to lay out the cards in boxes. And whenever there was a family occasion of graduations, Lois and Norm would make their way back to their place at Sherry Park to be able to host the fun. Lois was the kind of grandmother who encouraged you in big and small ways to reach for your dreams. Darcy shared one memory which really demonstrated the subtle yet deliberate way that Lois operated. Apparently, when Darcy was around 6 and had to confront the escalator at the shopping mall, rather than make it a safety issue for Darcy, Lois pretended that it was she who was scared and asked could Darcy hold her hand so she wouldn't be scared. When they reached the bottom, Darcy remembers telling her grandmother, "I'm so proud of you, Grandma," and being proud of herself that she could help her. And that summarizes a lot of what for all of you was part of the way you loved your grandmother. You were all so proud of her, proud to be hers. And she instilled in you a confidence in yourself that helped you to blossom. And her relationship with your grandfather served as a wonderful model as you selected your own life partners of Amy, Jeff, Rick, and Dan, and most recently Jenny. What a joy for her to share in your simchas, and then to welcome your children, her great-grandchildren, Lily and Jenna, Zoe and Piper, Drew, Will, and Colin. All knew that they could show her their newest stuff and tell her about school and what they were doing. Always interested in everything that was going on in all of your lives. She was a good listener. She kept track of things to ask follow-up questions. And from near or from far, you all in every generation felt like she was invested and interested in every detail of your life. Her enthusiasm resonated through the far reaches of the phone calls. That's something you will all miss greatly. At the end of the Torah portion, there is the burial of our patriarch Abraham. Of course, it was the other way around for Lois and for Norman. It was our sad duty at the beginning of this whole COVID mess to lay Norman to rest here. And like two lovebirds that found it difficult to be separated, Lois now joins him here. It's the end of an era for the Press family, but we live on in the memories of those we loved. And that's why the Torah portion's name is Chaye Sarah. It does not mention the death of Sarah, but rather the life of Sarah. Lois's life may have ended, but Chaye Lois, the life of Lois, courses through all of you as you embrace the commitment to your spouse and to this family in her memory, and as you perform the loving deeds of caring for one another and for our larger world in her name. Like our historic matriarch, this beautiful woman bequeaths to you her value and her values. And so we join with the sages to declare, Zichrona Livracha, may her memory continue to be your blessing and live through you and through your deeds. Amen. Each of you has precious memories of Lois. We take a moment now as we silently compose the eulogy of our own hearts. Yehiyu l'ratzon imrefi v'heyon libi lefanecha Adonai tzuri v'goali. May not only the words that we speak, but even our most precious and private meditations be acceptable to you, our God, our Rock, and our Redeemer. Amen. I'm going to invite our friends to come and help us with the lowering of the casket. ask you to please rise for the prayer of El Malay, which asks God to accept Lois's soul. Marcy, you're happy. You're comfortable sitting, Marcy. El Malay Rachamim, Shochein Ba'maromim. Hamtzei Menucha Nechona Tachat Kanfei HaShechina, Im Kidoshim Utehorim Kezohar Harakia Mazhirim, Et Nishmat Lois Lynette Press, Shel Hachal Olama. Baal HaRachamim, Yastireha B'Setra Kanafav L'Olamim, B'Yitzror HaChaim Et Nishmata, Adonai Hu Nachalata, B'Tanuach B'Shalom Al Mishkava B'Nomar, Amen. O compassionate God, eternal Spirit of the universe, grant perfect rest in your sheltering presence to Lois Lynette Press, who has entered unto eternity. O God of mercy, let her find refuge in your eternal presence, and let her soul be bound up in the bond of everlasting life. God is her inheritance. May she rest in peace, and let us answer. Amen. And we join together in the Kaddish prayer, as together we affirm. Yitgadal v'yitgadash shemei Rabbah, v'yalma divrach hirutei v'yamlich malchutei, b'chayachon u'v'yomechon u'v'chayei dechol Beit Yisrael, ba'agala u'v'zman kari v'imru Amen. Yehei shmei Rabbah mevorach leolam u'lalmei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitalev v'yithalal shemei dekudesha b'reichu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata da'amiran b'alma b'imru Amen. Yehei shlama Rabbah min shemaya v'chaim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael b'imru Amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav, hu yaseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael b'imru Amen. A miracle is ended. A precious soul returns now to her Maker. Hamakom yinachem etchem b'toch shar avlei Tzion v'Yerushalayim. May God comfort you along with all the mourners of Zion and of Jerusalem. Amen. I'm going to invite you to perform this last task of helping to bury our beloved dead. We're going to put a little bit of earth on the casket. I invite you to, you can use the shovel if it's comfortable for you to do that, or you're welcome to just reach in and pick up a little of the earth and put it on the casket as well, whichever way. If you do lift up the shovel, don't pass it from one person to another, but rather we're just going to put it back in the earth, back into the bucket, as a way of reminding us that we don't pass our grief from one person to another.
Whoever wishes first.
Need some help?
Do you want to do Mercy?